right, and hello, everybody. Excuse me. Good day. Welcome back to another episode of Merged Worlds, our Dungeons and Dragons story podcast stream. It is a pleasure to see you, and thank you for coming by and letting me tell my story once again. This is a reschedule from last week. Normally, I do it every other Friday. But last Friday was my wife's birthday, and we had plans, so I put it off for until today. Regular episode next Friday. We'll be back as normal as well. Today might maybe smidge run a little longer than normal. Not sure. A lot of writing I got done. It's hard sometimes to judge how much on paper equates to time because I have a habit of vamping and expanding upon what I've written a lot. So I'm confident that we'll fill the hour. May go a little over. We'll recap where we left off. We're still with Artis, Petal, Rand, Maeve, and Kip telling their story as they're dealing with the situation in Haven's Crest. So you'll remember that in this city, it's kind of sideways being controlled by a church that is a religion devoted to basically a Queen of Darkness kind of thing. They're known as the Children of the Night, and they worship the moon goddess, which they say is the light that breaks through the darkness. So it's not like they're worshipping the darkness per se, but they worship the moon and the light projected through the darkness by it. And as such, Children of the Night, so on and so forth. They're the guiding light that will help lead you through the darkness, is kind of their take on it. And our heroes, especially the cleric and paladin of the God of Truth, know this to be a false god. No such god exists. Not one of the pantheon of gods that we're aware of. Now, there is, of course, always the tiny chance that there's a god that they're not aware of. I've been asked, is that possible? Well, it is Merged Worlds. But one thing all the worlds that have been combined in to create Merged Worlds have in common is that they all have knowledge of the same gods, though those gods can sometimes go by different names and such, depending upon the world and the languages and so on. But that overall, it's still the same pantheon that everyone kind of is familiar with. We do also know that there are some demigods, at least there were. The Watchers were demigods, of which Zoltan, who pops up from time to time, the Gray Man, and kind of got this whole ball rolling back early in the day, caused all the trouble to get it happening, that he is the only remaining demigod to everyone's knowledge. So at this point, the belief is this is a false god. They know, and they also believe that they're in league with vampires, which again, being an evil-based race most of the time, also falls under that whole, hey, this is probably a con of some kind. And so Artis and her friends have been working in this city to try to rekindle the flame of the old gods and such, in such a way that try and save this city from itself, or from the religious forces that are ruling it. The head of the church is the Lord of the Night. He's got a sidekick. His second command is a guy named Minos. We haven't really met him much, but he was mentioned at one point during the story. And there are, of course, several other clerics of the true gods in the city that are in hiding. People don't know they're clerics, who are helping our heroes in their endeavors. Petal, the wild mage, had gone to a mage's tower that had been expelled by the mage who lived there, keeping anyone from being able to come in many, many years in the past. It's covered in thorns that could cut through metal. They themselves were nigh indestructible, and no one's ever been able to get in. But when Petal showed up and tried casting a spell to see if she could have any effect on them, the thorns moved, basically grabbed her and pulled her in through the walls, where inside she discovered the ghost of Luthien. Luthien the Long, named after his extremely long beard. Touches the floor, if you will. Very long beard. In my mind, he reminds me of his beard is a lot like what Merlin's beard was in the old Disney cartoon, The Sword in the Stone. You know, that very full but long, super long beard that hits the ground and curls up a little bit. But it turns out he was a wild mage as well, and had enspelled the house in such a way that only a wild mage could gain access to it. And he has a lot of information and knowledge and research over the years that he says will help Petal, that he can teach her. That's going to benefit her and her friends, but also warns her that every day she spends inside, a week passes outside. It's part of the nature of the spell that he cast to protect himself. Protect the keep, if you will, because there were things inside he did not want anyone else to get access to, especially the children of the night, bad folks that were at the point condemning mages. He was one of the last mages left in the entire kingdom. So she decides to stay in there, even though she knows things are going on outside and that her friends could be in trouble, because in the end, what he's offering could help them very much, as well as he makes a comment that he knows about the book she's carrying and knows what she's trying to do and can help her with that as well. And that's kind of the ceiling point. That's the, okay, all right, I'm going to stay, but we need to go fast. You teach me everything you can as quickly as you can, because I can't stay in here forever. And so she stays inside to learn that. Friends on the outside don't know what's happened to her. They just know they can't get to her, and they haven't heard a message from her. Because Luthien advised her that once she leaves, she can leave any time. Once she does, the spell that's been protecting this place will end, and the whole place will basically crumble to dust. The whole thing's just going to become destroyed, including anything left inside. So she has one shot to learn from him what she can. He's been living in here as a ghost, trapped as well, unable to move on to what's after the next phase of existence, into the seven heavens, which is where the gods of light are told to dwell, and where their followers then move on after death to live amongst the seven heavens. So he's like, hey, you want to let me go? I'll go, but this is the only shot you've got, and I think I can really help you. And he seems to know a little bit more of what's going on. He can tell what's going on outside. So, because he's given her these clues, hey, yes, your friends are getting involved in stuff, but you got to stay here if you want help, On the flip side of that, Artis has been kind of sneaking out, or not sneaking out, but going out in disguise, hang out with a young woman who was loyal to the clerics that lived in the town, and just trying to learn more about what's going on there. And her and the young girl she's with come across an alley. This was last episode. An alley where several Templars of this church are accosting a young couple. When I say young couple, I'm not saying that they're together, but a young couple of people. A young boy, young girl. Could be brother, sister, could be dating. I didn't really stress into that, but a young couple of people. The guy is already unconscious, got a head wound, and the gentlemen have the girl pinned against the wall. What they're going to do, don't know. Going to be nefarious. Artis, of course, can't let this slide and steps in, and the only weapon she has on her is Quintius, the artifact scepter that she carries, which is very strong and steady. You could swack someone over the head with it, and it probably is going to be just fine. It's very sturdy, and because of that, a little bit stronger than a normal scepter might be. That's of gold and such, which might bend if you hit someone. Gold is a bendable thing. But someone very strong, like, say, Maeve, could probably snap it in half if they really, really wanted to, without too much struggle. But she uses it to basically fight them off, and at one point they're getting the best of Artis, and Artis gets stabbed with a sword. And Quintius, in anger over the situation, and probably a little fear that she's going to be hurt, ends up summoning this huge blast of holy light that just comes from the sky like a column. That literally incinerates them, but harms no one else. Doesn't hurt Artis or the young folks at all. And Artis is like, I didn't know you could do that. And Quintius, who's himself, because she can see like an illusion of him that only she can see. She can see the form that basically what he was before he became part of the artifact. He was originally a person tens of thousands of years ago, whose soul he accepted that in order to gain vengeance for his family. The goddess of light took his soul and placed it inside the artifact. So the physical representation is what he looked like as a young man, as a cleric of light himself. And he's like, I didn't know I could do that either. And he seems a little concerned about that, because technically, even though we really didn't discuss it much, I'm going to get into it now, he doesn't normally have the ability to enact his own abilities. There are a few that are constant, like searching for evil. Detect evil is always on to some degree. He can take the visual form anytime he wants, and he can see anything in a given area where Artis is. Even more than what she can see. He can see someone sneaking up behind her. A lot of times in combat, he may be talking to her like sword behind you, kind of giving her clues to what's happening, which helps her in combat because no one else can see or hear him and doesn't know he's there helping. But he can't see like a quarter mile down the road. He can't see beyond what her capabilities to see was, even though he might be able to see around corners and things, so on and so forth. There's a range to it. Those are constant, but the overall special abilities still have to be enacted through a command word or something of that nature through Artis. This is that whole part of the me vamping parts and not even getting to the story yet that I was mentioning. Might run this a little bit longer today because we got some important stuff to throw at you. So, they end up fleeing after they defeat the Templars who are being turds in the alley. And there was a crowd by the end of it. A whole bunch of people were watching at the end of the alley. And a young woman came up and was like, we'll help the kids. Because Artis healed the boy so he wouldn't be like dying and stuff. But she was still injured. Somewhat. She could only heal herself a little. Because remember, she's not a healer. She's a cleric of truth. And the old lady's like, we'll help the kids go. Before other people show up, that big column of light's going to attract people. You need to go. And Artis's medallion, her holy symbol, had come loose at that point. The woman saw it, recognized it, know what she was, and was still helping her, which, is a positive in a situation where they're trying to build faith and trust with the folks out there. These people saw Artis save these kids from what could have been very, very bad. And so that's where we're going to kind of start up from today. So I have some reading. There'll be a lot of reading today, and none as well. So hopefully you enjoy it, and I appreciate you coming in. Let me tell some more of my tale. It had been an eventful week. Since Artis's incident with the Templars in the alley, word had been spreading throughout the city. It had become the talk of the town. The young couple from the alley had been asked to tell their story again and again. The many witnesses did the same, and as natural, the tales only grew with each telling. Right? Young couple survived. These people saved us. The young guy's like, I don't have much to tell. I was unconscious the whole time. But the young girl and then the people who stood at the end of the alley who saw this happening are telling that story to everybody they meet. According to Vanessa's contacts, the Lord of the Night was furious. Remember, Vanessa is one of the clerics, that's their allies, who is a cleric of the goddess of death. The Lord of the Night was furious. He had his people searching everywhere, as well as had started rumors telling a different version of the event. That's how he's trying to combat that, right? A version that spoke of Artis as the instigator, a criminal and heretic who attacked peaceful priests of the Children of the Night. So he's trying to combat this word of mouth by spreading other rumors along, saying, no, this heretic who attacked loyal members of the clergy are Templars and so on and so forth, and swindled these other people and tricked them and such, and they're a threat to people and we need to find her. So they're trying to throw that type of thing out there to combat the spread of what is the truth, even though it's getting more embellished as it goes, right? As the two contradicting tales spread, the people became divided, which is only natural, right? There are some people who are wholly devoted to this new church. And there's some people who maybe aren't that happy with the way the church is run. They accept it. There's not a lot of option. They have so much power now. And then there's probably this smaller group of people who've, maybe always had knowledge of the gods, even though they're a little mad at them because they felt betrayed by the gods. But kind of looking at this, which one's really worse situation here? Gods that didn't do anything to help us and weren't involved, or this new group who at times is kind of oppressive, right? The people want to know more about you, Vanessa said. She'd sat with the companions in their underground shelter, joined by Tilden. Tilden is the original cleric of Circe, goddess of nature, who first introduced them to everyone else, first brought them into this group of trying to save the city. Yes, people want to know more about you, Vanessa said. She sat with the companions in the underground there. But we need to do so safely, said Tilden. It'll be hard to know who can be trusted. We cannot risk them being captured or worse. And when they say them, they mean Artis and her friends. They're their champions. They're like, these are the people we believe are going to help us take back our city. So he's talking to Vanessa at that point. While I agree, replied Vanessa, we still must take the chance. This is the first time an interest is being shown in the true gods in years, and we dare not let the opportunity pass. The time of hiding and playing it safe has passed. The two clerics turned to Artis, awaiting her thoughts. I agree with Vanessa, said Artis. There will always be a danger in revealing ourselves, but we must take the chance. You will need to find a way to arrange a safe place where I can meet with people. It's best not to bring them here, obviously, because they're hidden in the sewers in that special, clean, safe room that they're in that Maeve has not left in weeks. Probably stir crazy. We don't want to bring them here because this is the safe place, but a place where I can go out and meet them safely. Because one of the big problems is you can't move a Minotaur about the city. Maeve is stuck in there and can't participate in anything because she's just too obvious. There are no Minotaurs in this entire kingdom besides her. Tilden nodded and, taking his leave, went to begin preparations. So at this time, Vanessa, of course, asks them, hey, have you heard anything else about your friend Petal? And we know, they've been helping, but the friends, unfortunately, are like, no, we've not had anything. Both Kip and Ran have spent large periods of time staying there, watching the tower in hopes that they'd get a sign from Petal or that she'd come back out somehow or something that'll let them know that she's at least alive or okay in there, or some opportunity would arrive that they could get in and help her. Unfortunately, none of that has happened. Since Artis's incident in the alley, they've been able to do less of that because now there's the concern of protecting Artis as well, where she was kind of running around on her own, slightly disguised by them. Now it's a little bit more dangerous. So the clerics that live in that city do have people they can depend on, and they're using some of them to keep an eye on the tower, which frees up Kip and Ran to be able to assist more with what's going on at the current time. It had been a little over 2 weeks since Petal had disappeared at this point, and there was no sign of her at all. Nothing. There had been no changes anywhere, and Vanessa, at that point explains, yes, and okay, I'm sorry to hear that. I was hoping you had good news, because she doesn't get to talk to him every day. She's got a life, and she has to sneak in here as well, right? They can't be obvious about it, but she has her contacts and people, and she's the most connected, I should say, of the clerics in the city. And I didn't really talk too much about that before, but Vanessa is technically a noble, where the other one is they own shops. One's a blacksmith, one's a baker, so on and so forth. Tilden is like a seamstress and repairs clothing. They're all the common man, if you will. But she's a low to mid-level noble. So it's a little bit harder for her to get out. But as such, she's also in a place of privilege and power where she has more contacts and the ability to extend herself out across the country. And so she's been seeking any assistance she can find that might help them get Petal out or help with the tower, because she knows that these people here are going to help them, but Petal's part of that, and they may need Petal. She's not personally invested in Petal, but she definitely wants Artis and all their friends to help, and the more power they have, including a mage, the more beneficial it's going to be to them. For many years, Vanessa and the other clerics had no thought about the mage tower. They aren't mages. There's nothing in there they could use out of sight, out of mind. So for the first time in years, she's now putting her feelers back out. Are there any mages we can contact or anything of that nature that might be able to help us? Sadly, at this point, she's found nothing. When asked if she's familiar with the Brotherhood of Magic, which is the organization of mages that they're familiar with back in Serenity and their home in Paxwall in the Southern Kingdoms, she's not. They're so far away at this point, they've never heard of the Brotherhood of Magic or what they represent. At this point, there really isn't anything else they can do but hope that Petal is safe. And so they begin their plans on, okay, what is our next step forward? And that planning begins. Now we're going to step over. Petal sat at a large wooden desk, reviewing the notes and drawings while the ghost of Luthien floated nearby. "This is fascinating," she commented. "So you believe wild magic isn't really random?" "Exactly," replied the spirit triumphantly. "Wild magic, whatever its source seems to be, is trying to achieve something specific. Whatever that source is, it's like it's trying to convert or direct normal magic to some specific end." So he's saying wild magic, which is uncontrolled, that exists in the world and that only a few mages have the ability to connect to or tap to, like Petal or Deacon, for example, or Deacon's uncle, Nylat Fireman. We're born with that ability to tap in and draw from wild magic, which can, be good, but at the same time also has a lot of negatives to it because it can cause spells to have a wild magic surge, which then something different happens, right? Something completely off the wall than what you plan to do with that spell, or alters it in some way depending on the level of the surge. But Luthien's ghost is saying, no, my years, I believe that there's something behind it. It's trying to do something, and it's using people who can tap into it to try to reach those ends. Is it sentient? Asked Petal. Like, is it knowledge? Is it like a knowing force that's trying to do something? Not that I can find, replied Luthien, pointing to a diagram. It's more like it's being guided. Scratch that. More like it's being kind of pushed in a specific way. And that guidance, for whatever reason, has stopped, leaving it to continue on its own, something it appears unable to do successfully. So he's saying that wild magic had a source at some point. It had something that was guiding or pushing it to do something, but then that stopped, and now wild magic without that guidance has gone awry. What that was, who that was, whatever thing controlled wild magic at some point, obviously in the far back history, because Petal and no one she's ever known has ever had a knowledge of this. Whatever that stopped, there's no reason why that they know. Petal read more of his research. This is a whole new way of looking at magic, she said. Oh, Denji asked, is it okay if your storyline is white noise? By all means, Denji. I appreciate the view. By all means. Good. We have a good rest. But Petal says this is a whole new way to look at wild magic, she said. Because if it's not truly wild, or not truly completely chaotic, what is that goal that it's trying to do, even though it doesn't seem to be avidly working towards it at this point? More importantly, who originally was guiding it and why did they stop guiding it? Right? Because wild magic is a huge force of existence. It's like nature. It's like regular magic. Something controlling the whole thing would be a being of very, very, very high power. The spirit goes on to explain a little bit more about what it's found or his theories about how wild magic works. He explains that naturally what wild mages have learned to do is to try to block wild magic. When casting spells, 99% of the time, they're taught to suppress the wild magic so the spell they're trying to cast will work. In some situations, they've learned to adapt and cast wild magic spells which come from purely wild magic, but are directed still in a specific way. What his theories are is that if you could intertwine wild magic and regular magic, not by just but make it a part of the spell, you could strengthen the spell, giving it more of a oomph. Imagine that wild magic is explosives, right? Regular magic is the thing that is being hurled forward like the bullet. If you can mix a better explosive in with the regular magic you've got, you're going to get way bigger bang for your buck. So learning to somehow find the code, if you will, the way to work those two types of magics together towards one end would minimalize the amount of a wild magic surge, but the spells themselves may start to convert more to what their original effect was supposed to be, which may not be necessarily the original effect you're trying to achieve. But through this, you could start to learn what wild magic is trying to do. With more of that, you could piece those puzzles together and maybe get the bigger picture. He explains that mages that are born with access to wild magic have basically the potential to be stronger than any non-wild magic mage because they have the ability to tap into both types of magic. And again, this is based on how much access and control they have over it. Much like many other skills, some people are born who can access wild magic a little, and some people who have a very large infinity to it. Again, Petal, Deacon, and Deacon's uncle, Nylai Firemoon. These are three people who were born with very strong connections to wild magic, so much so that before they even began learning magic, they could just control wild magic to make effects. You'll remember way back early in the story, they walk in, Petal's making her little blocks float in the air. She's not casting a spell per se, but she is controlling the wild magic around it to get an effect. And then they popped into, other things. I mean, because again, then the surge kicks in. Learning to control that is important so that they don't end up just destroying themselves by releasing wild magic all willy-nilly. Now, Luthen goes on to explain that, like himself, Petal has a very natural high access to wild magic. And she spent her whole life training to suppress it and only letting little bits through at a time through specific spells. Instead, she needs to learn to focus wild magic and weave it within spells themselves. He says that he can begin showing her that. He can show her the basics of how to get that started, that he himself was still learning to do that near the end of his life. Because he didn't intend to be spending the end of his life in this place. When he cast the spell to protect his home and himself and things in it, it was a very powerful spell, and there was a large amount of wild magic involved. And while it still did what it wanted it to do, it still had undesired effects, like trapping him inside as well, because the spell read that as the easiest way to protect him. And when he finally passed away inside of there, which, you think about it, week outside, day inside, wasn't as long. When you think about that, he passed away relatively soon. Probably ran out of food and stuff. He passed away. But the spell was so powerful enough, it wouldn't even let his spirit leave. It was still trying to protect him. So that's why he's been trapped inside this place until the spell ends. And the spell will only end when Petal leaves, because the spell was supposed to protect him until someone else strong enough in wild magic was able to get there. In his mind, he was going to cast this spell, he was going to teleport out of here, and eventually, hopefully, someone of wild mage would show back up, get inside, and then take over from where he left off. Didn't quite work out that way for him. So he's like, he spent most of his life learning how to, last part of his life learning how to intertwine these spells, and he can explain it to her and teach her to focus it. He also begins to say that much like other magics, regular magic and things, wild magic can be focused through items. There are wild magic items out there. They exist. They have for a very long time. But he's saying even some natural things can focus the magic for them if used in conjunction, much like a spell component. And that learning what some of those are could, again, help intertwine and increase the power of different effects of different spells. He says, much like regular magic, specific gems and stuff, diamonds in particular, black opals, things of this nature, tiger's eyes, these things, not the animal, it's a type of gem. Tiger's eye is a gem. I don't mean an eyeball from a tiger. Let me clarify. Tiger's eye, gems. Things like that, including some metals and natural resources, are better or naturally better at focusing and absorbing and using magic and wild magic. Now, he says that in his research, the one thing he feels would be the most powerful conductor of wild magic is a specific type of gem named painite. He says painite is overwhelmingly rare. To his knowledge, only a couple of these gems have ever been found in existence, and that they are valued above the value, like literally worth more than kingdoms to those who get their hands on them. And for the couple of times he's aware of, tales and legends of a mage getting a hold of one, they were able to create artifacts of insane amounts of power just from the focusing ability and absorption of painite as a gem. Again, only a few people even know it exists. Most regular people don't because it's so rare. It's a deep blue color. And again, highly prized by anyone just because of its rarity, but even more so by magic users. Let me see here. And then Petal then kind of looks a little bit nervous and looks at him and says, "What about mine?" And, sitting next to her on the desk is the book that she pulled from the library back in Caradon a long while ago. He looks at the book and his brow kind of wrinkles in concern. "Based on the book you carry and my own research, if you truly wish to be successful, you will need access to a painite gem. And not just any one. It's going to have to be one of a large size. At least the size of, a chicken egg. give her an example. I don't even know if such a thing exists, but it's the only thing I know that will be able to focus that much magical power. So he's saying whatever it is that Petal's trying to do with what she's getting out of this book, it's going to take incredible magical power, and to focus it, she's going to need a really big type of the rarest gem that's the best at this type of thing. It's almost an impossible task. Petal nodded sadly, and she'd feared as much. Don't give up yet, child, said Luthien. There is still hope. Come with me. Hopping down from the chair, Petal followed the ghost float to the other side of the laboratory. A long, flat wooden box sat on a table there. It was about 5.5 feet long. So a long, flat, wooden, almost like a chest, but it's only like that deep. Okay. Those of you in the audio side of this, I should say, probably no more than like 6-7 inches high. What's inside? She asked curiously, fighting her natural urge to open it. She is half tender, after all. She sees a box. Her first instinct is to open it. But the mage in her says, I should not touch this. I could blow up. We're in a mage's place, and this dude obviously has some protective spells. Look what he did to this house, right? So she says, what's inside? And he says, a gift, Luthien replied, smiling. I made it myself, combining an entire life of research and experience. He waved his hand gently, causing the chest to shimmer for a moment before the lid slowly rose. Looking inside, Petal saw a staff of exceptional beauty. It was made of a twisting dark wood with leather wraps for grips. Lines of silver infused into the wood from top to bottom, seeming like natural grains. So this is a wooden staff that's kind of spirally, but naturally. It's not like a perfect spiral, like a spring, but it's kind of twisty and spiral at places, but not overly so. So just small ones. So it still looks like a stick. There's leather grips where you'd hold on to it in an area that's particularly flat. And in the grains of the wood, where you'd normally see the lines, there's actually silver in those lines. So either it was, slightly carved out and layer was silver was put in there, like put in and then melted and so on and so forth, or infused into the wood magically. But there are silver lines that run throughout it all the way from top to bottom. At the top, the silver converged with the wood to wrap around a large sapphire gem that glistened in the torchlight. With a nod from Luthien, Petal carefully picked it up. She almost dropped it in surprise when she felt the wood move and adjust to her hand. Within a few seconds, it had shrunken in length until it was the perfect size for her height. Luthien smiled. It's accepted you. Is it intelligent? Asked Petal. No, he replied, but it is reactive. It was designed to focus wild magic and only will work for one who has that gift. How do I use it? Petal asked excitedly. The mage smiled. Come, I will show you. We must move quickly. Events are unfolding all around us. So once again, he's saying, we've got to hurry. Because again, one day of this is a week outside. Stuff is happening out there. We have to hurry. But come with me. I have a very small period of time to teach you how to use this staff. So the fact that he created this staff, and that she's never seen anything like it, and its explained abilities specifically designed to help focus wild magic, this is what would be the definition of an artifact. It's not a magical item. Magical items, there are multiple versions of some shape or form. It's something that can be reproduced by others. This is a one-of-a-kind item. And that doesn't mean she couldn't maybe, after using it, learn how to make one herself down the road. There can be more than one of an artifact, obviously. But they're not mass-produced. A bag of holding, while a powerful magic item, is not an artifact, right? Whereas a Hayward's Handy Haversack, less likely to be found, but still technically not an artifact. Multiple people have them throughout the world. You find yourself a longsword +5. That's a rare magic item, not an artifact. You find a magic longsword +5 made of platinum named Doombringer, created by God of Chaos. That's an artifact. That's got some extra special powers to it, and you're not going to find one of those just lying around anywhere. It's a special circumstance to come across something like that. This would be an artifact, just to clarify the difference. Much like Quintius, the magical scepter that Artus carries, is also a one-of-a-kind artifact. The physical item itself, created by Quintius when he was alive, and then his soul put inside of it and given the power from the goddess of light. So that is a clerically created magical artifact, which are technically even more rare, to be honest with you, in my experience. So Petal's now going to go off and learn how to use this. That's her next job. So we're going to switch back over to what everybody else is doing. So over the next week, Artus and her allies begin meeting with small groups of citizens around the city. They never go to the same place twice. Tilden vets each person and is very limited with who he chooses to let in. So he's going out and finding people he believes are genuine and can be trusted and giving them an opportunity to come to a place and spend some time talking with Artus. And that's it. I mean, what she does during those meetings is probably going to differ depending on the crowd and their reaction, right? Maybe she'll show some magic because she has to, because she says she can do, because she actually has clerical magic abilities. I mean, that's my personal opinion. That's one of the easiest ways to convince someone that you're a little bit closer to what you say you are, right? A charlatan, very likely, is not going to have actual magical powers if he's just claiming to be a wizard or a mage. Someone using magic are more likely to be a wizard, mage, or a cleric, right? They're going to have a little more truth to what they're saying. That magic comes from somewhere. Granted, the Children of the Night have magical abilities, although from what we know, they're not clerical in nature, but they do have magic that they've used to kind of trick people. So she has to be very careful about how she does that. She has to be completely open about the process and how it's being done. But being a cleric of truth, she has a lot of experience with doing that. People who come to meet her are very excited and or curious. Some people are like, oh, wow, yes, we've heard about the story about you, and you're kind of a hidden celebrity. You stood up against people that maybe I'm not too fond of, or maybe I'm scared of. You helped some innocent people from what could have been a really bad situation, which was a really bad situation, and you went above and beyond to save people you didn't know. That's a great positive in your favor, considering how many people have claimed to see it. And very likely Tilden, if you can find one, is going to bring one of those two of those witnesses and bring them into the meeting as well, who can be like, yeah, I saw her do it. This is what she did. Magical light from heaven. It was crazy, being able to add more support and truthfulness to what she's saying. But she's not sitting there trying to, convert people overnight. She's just there to talk about who she is, what she represents, and what she believes. And says, hey, I understand that you've been led to believe that the original gods, the real gods, but she's always going to prefer to call them something like that. She's going to call them the true gods, the real gods. It's her way. It's a little thing slid into the conversation to mentally manipulate people and to start thinking her side's real, the other side's not. Is it a good or a bad thing? Everybody does it in a conversation when you're trying to speak to something you believe in, whether it just be the facts of an argument, right? Well, the truth is, everybody does that. It's your way of trying to slide that in. And so she's going to be doing that, not in a nefarious way, but a way to try to help people see it from that perspective. So she speaks of the gods, her life. She speaks about her home. She says, I'll be honest, I come from a kingdom. I am a member of royalty. She doesn't quite go into the princess side of it, but she goes, I was a member of royalty. I've left that behind to come out into the world to be able to help, because that's the calling that I have. And through the gods' plans, I've arrived here in a place that I genuinely feel you guys needed it the most. So she speaks of her experiences and what she's done in the past, tells stories of their adventures where, hey, we came across this evil thing, we had to defeat it. Hey, this and so on and so forth. She doesn't bring up the vampire. Doesn't want to throw that type of a scare into people. Hey, do you know there's vampires living in your city? Doesn't want to throw that at people yet, because they haven't quite seen any actual signs of that in the city, other than the fact that their ally clerics also believe that there's vampires here, and they came to the same conclusion. So that leads to that. But she doesn't bring up the vampire side of things, because, again, she doesn't have any proof. So she also, during this time, tells the story of the alley, what happened in the alley, the true story. At the time I saw this was going on, I had to intercede. She brings out Quintius. She doesn't explain exactly what Quintius is. Magical artifact, I can see the guy walking around, you can't. But she'll say that this is a holy artifact of power that the gods have seemed to bless me with to use in their name, and I'm bringing it here now to help. And I used it to help save the young couple in the alley. So things of that nature. So she's not lying in anything that she says. But there are some things she's leaving out because it's either too hard to explain, too hard to make them believe, or she just has no proof. It's through these meetings and gatherings that she's at that she learns that there's still quite a few people that have some faith in the true gods. Most of them fear revealing it, knowing how ostracized and prejudiced the children of the night are against anyone who speaks of the regular gods. No one wants to draw that type of attention on themselves. Artis also speaks to that, right? She's like, well, what kind of a god was trying to rule you through fear? That's not truth. That's not the light. That's not what we represent. They're saying they're the light that cuts through the darkness. No, they're bringing the darkness, right? I'm here to show you the true power of the light. People tell her their own stories as well and tell us experiences of the children of the night. And she does that. She said, well, what are your experiences? What have you, how have you interacted with them? Has it been good? Has it been bad? And as people start to talk of their own stories and how they feel maybe a little oppressed or how they are afraid to maybe in their own homes kind of thing, it brings other people who are like, yeah, I kind of feel that way too. And it gets them as part of that conversation. Learning through commonality and shared experiences is probably the best way for anyone to learn anything. And to find out that your neighbors feel the same way you do, that adds a lot of credence to what you feel. It verifies and justifies, okay, I feel this, it's a real feeling. Other people around me feel this way too. So by the time people leave the meeting, most of them are, hello, ow, that hurt, don't do that, you butt. I'm sorry, I just got stabbed by a kitty. What are you doing, you silly girl? Eat your treats. Oh, what? Stab me right in the shoulder. So by the time people are leaving, they're feeling more renewed in faith, right? They're starting to see a little bit of hope there. They're starting to see a light at the end of that tunnel. And sometimes people are leaving angry. Now they're angry at the children of the night. They're angry at what they feel is now oppressing them. And then some people just leave unimpressed. Can't win everybody over, right? Some people show up and they're like, you tell a good story, but you don't really see much different than what we're already dealing with. Trade one for another, right? So, but no one, at least at these meetings, has been angry or upset that she's talked about what she did or anything of that nature. One second, while I take a drink. Whew, thirsty today. Okay. Artis, Maeve, Kip, and Ran sat together enjoying their evening meal. So this is inside that hidden room underneath the store that they've been living in that's technically connected to the sewers through a secret passageway. In an hour or so, Tilden was scheduled to arrive to take Artis to another meeting. They chatted about their current situation. They'd been in Haven's Crest for nearly a month at this point, and Petal had been missing almost 3 weeks. While no one was willing to speak it aloud, they each feared she may be lost to them. Kip was taking it exceptionally hard, blaming himself. Because remember, he was there with her. Didn't want her to be alone. She disappeared under his watch, and so he's blaming himself. They were now trying to figure out their next move. They knew eventually they would need to address the public en masse, which would leave them completely exposed. It must be done very carefully if they're to pull it off successfully. It was about that time when the door at the top of the stairs flew open. Instinctually, they reached for their weapons, but relaxed when they realized it was the cleric Cineas. The man raced down the stairs as quickly as his large body would allow, nearly falling more than once. By the time he reached them, he was flushed, gasping for air, out of breath, and struggling to speak. So remember, Cineas is the cleric who's a big guy. He's the baker, right? He owns a bakery. And he's a very, very large man, which is not unusual in that line of work. My mom worked in a bakery, obviously. True, my mom owned a bakery. So these type of things happen, right? But he's a cleric of the god of Malika. And he's rushed in And he doesn't visit that often. He provides a lot of the food and stuff for them, but it's delivered by Tilden or others. Maeve urged the man to take a moment, but he shook his head. They've taken him, he gasped. Who? Asked Artis, alarmed. Who's been taken? And by whom? Tilden, he replied. By the Children of the Night. He was arrested by Templars as he was closing up the shop. Crimes against the church, he was told. Worse yet, they know he was a cleric. So the Children of the Night arrived as he was closing up Templars and probably a cleric or two, accusing him of crimes against the church. He was arrested and taken. This, of course, bad news. This news is grave indeed, said Maeve. Do you know where he was taken? Cineas nodded. To the church, and not just him, several others as well. Some were his neighbors who spoke up and tried to intervene when he was being taken. I've been told several other people who've met with Artis have been reported missing as well. So Tilden and some of the people that she's met have gone missing. Could be they were talking about it. It got in the ears of somebody who they didn't want to get in the ears of, and it was reported to the church. But one way or another, Tilden has been found out to be a cleric, and he's been arrested by the Children of the Night. The church is trying to move quickly to quash our work, said Cineas. I've already sent word to cancel tonight's meeting. You wouldn't be safe there. The group began discussing what to do next while Artis sat silently in thought. No, said Artis, suddenly interrupting the conversation. I agree that this meeting won't be safe. Likely it's already been discovered. But I'm still going out tonight. What do you mean? Asked Cineas. Where on earth would you go? Out and amongst the people, replied Artis. Where they gather. At inns, taverns, maybe the market. To any place you know where I can find a friendly or sympathetic ear. So she's like, yeah, I understand we're not going to that meeting. They probably know about it. But I'm still going to go out and talk to people today. Instead of a meeting, I'm going to go find people. Any place you might know where I might find a sympathetic ear. So you're not just going to pick random places. It's like, you're a cleric. You still know where we might have a better chance of finding a group of people who are of like mind. Or at least of patient indifference to let me hear, won't just report me immediately. I can't say I like this idea, said Rand. You'll be too exposed, and the danger will be high. I won't be alone, replied Artis. You and Kip will accompany me. We knew this was going to get more dangerous the harder we pushed against the church. It just happened faster than we thought. So Artis is still determined to go out and still speak to people. She goes, but now Rand and Kip are going to come with me, and you're going to have to be my guards, right? Unfortunately, I can't take Maeve, the one who I'd like to take the most. Because she also, Maeve is she's not just a grunt work. She's not just muscles. She's a very eloquent speaker. She's very intelligent. She's also raised as a cleric, and she's a paladin of truth. So, she can speak to the same things Artis can in many ways. Artis is probably a little bit better at it for sure. But Maeve also has her own abilities and stuff that she could use as examples of the fact that she walks with the gods. So they decide that they're still going to go through with it, although Cineas and Rand aren't real happy about the whole thing. But they do agree that Rand and Kip will accompany. Now, what Kip suggests is that they keep moving. They don't just pick a spot and stay there all night. Go to a place, talk for a little bit, then get out and move. And then move quite a distance away. Pop up in a different part of the city. They're going to need to crisscross the pattern the city with his. Try not to use any type of specific pattern. Try to make it random. They'll have to do their best to stay in disguise whenever they're out on the street, and they'll have to avoid anywhere where Templars and members of the church are frequent or located nearby. We don't want a whole battalion of Templars in a building next door, and somebody we're talking to run over there, tell them, and come right back, right? We need that warning. Artis asks Cineas to contact Vanessa. They're going to need info on Tilden, including his condition and the others that were taken as well. Again, remember, Vanessa has the most contacts, and she does have some connections and contacts within the church itself. Very few, but she does have some. Cineas also will make arrangements for a couple people that he knows can be trusted, who will also help Artis, both in traveling with her and being used as scouting and keeping an eye out for any type of danger. So for several hours that night, Artis and her allies popped up around the city. sometimes talking to small groups, and sometimes to just an individual. There were a couple of close calls where they managed to leave right before a group of Templars arrived. Most people they came across were interested to hear what Artemis had to say, and even quite welcoming. Others ran from nervous to hostile. No one ever got violent, but Ran and Kip kept their eyes open and weapons ready at all times. By the time they finished and returned back to their safe room that evening, they were all exhausted, but in high spirits. "We did well this evening," said Artis. "People still remember the gods. They just need their faiths renewed." "We were lucky as well," replied Kip. "But eventually there will be violence. We won't be able to avoid the church forever." "When it comes, we'll do what needs to be done," Artis agreed sadly. "I pray that when that time comes, we won't find ourselves standing alone." Well, they didn't have to wait long. 2 nights later, they found themselves again in a group of people speaking to them. They'd gone to a tavern, a kind of seedy place, to be honest. A bit more rundown place that the Templars and the church would stay away from. Dangerous men, dangerous situations. You know, seedy type of bar. If this was an ocean nearby, this is where the pirates would sit. To give you an example. So seedy tavern. Every town's got one. You get some of the best quests there, to be honest with you. If you're playing D&D, always seek out a seedy tavern. It was a dark place, very rough-looking crowd, a group of about 20 people hanging out inside. Now, a couple people were actively speaking to Artis, who sat at the bar, talking with them, and the bartender, who was amicable. And once they said, "Hey, here's what we are, and is what we're here to do," the bartender's like, "Yeah, I'm fine with that. Sure, you're welcome." He had no problem with it. But most of the people just seemed to be ignoring Artis, drinking or talking quietly in corners, as people were wont to do. They'd been there for only a short period of time when Ran looked out the window and saw that a group of Templars were coming their way. Quickly, Ran made his way over to Artis to make arrangements to leave immediately. So he's like, "Artis, Templars are coming, we gotta go." Now, they'd already made arrangements with the barkeeper, who again was friendly to them, that should there be trouble, that they could head out the back. Artis and Ran were about to go that way when Kip appeared from the back room, letting him know that several Templars were approaching the back door as well. Almost immediately, the front door opened, and 6 well-armed Templars entered into the tavern. The man who came in first, clearly the leader, both by dress and rank, sees Artis and her friend standing by the bar and sneers. "We've been looking for you, milady. You've got to come with us." And the barkeep doesn't look too happy about this. The couple of people that they were talking to, kind of step back a little bit, not real happy to hear it either, but not trying to get involved in no trouble. Artis just stands there defiantly and Ran says, "I think not." Artis asks, "Am I being arrested? And if so, on what charge?" "Why, the assault and murder of an officer of the church, heresy, and inciting a riot." There really hasn't been any riot, per se. Assault and murder of the church, I guess he's referring to the alley issue. And heresy, well, anything that goes against their church, I'm sure they would view it that way. The man takes a step forward and says, "Come quietly now. We're not here to try and hurt you. It's best if you just come quietly." Ran and Kip's hands are on their blades, ready to be drawn. Oh, sorry, I skipped steps. So, yeah, come quietly. We're not here to hurt you. "And nor will ye," said a large, burly, scruffy man, who stood up from a table nearby. A huge man, well over 6.5 feet tall, muscle, and with an eye patch. Come on, I did say it's where pirates hang out. I had to give him an eye patch. "I think I've heard just enough of your crap for one evening." He steps forward just one step. He steps relatively sturdy. It's clear the man's been drinking. We'll say that. But he takes a step only the tiniest bit wobbly. "I've had enough of your crap. telling us how to live, what to think, who I can pray to. And now you interrupt my drinking so you can harm some lass who's just trying to speak the good word. The Templar, somewhat dismissing the man, says, "This doesn't concern you, citizen. I think it would be best for you to mind your own business." Half the men in the tavern rose and began to draw their weapons. The scruffy man with the eye patch says, "Well, I think we're going to make it our business." The Templar were shocked to see such resistance from just an average person, people who, to be honest, a moment ago looked like they didn't care about artists in the world. "You would not dare harm a servant of the church, a servant of the gods." The man took one more step forward as he pulled a huge, well, I would say huge, but he pulled a big, thick club from the back of his belt. "There be only one servant of the gods I see in this room, Sonny, and you'll not be placing your hands on her." And in that moment, the room erupts into violence. The Templars quickly try to rush forward to get a hold of Artis, but are immediately blocked by members of both Rand and Kip, as well as members of the people in the room. The barkeep himself has pulled his own baseball bat-looking club out from behind the bar and steps forward, and the whole room busts into violence and chaos. When the moment finally slips, where Kip's not directly in combat, he's getting pushed around, people are in the way, he says to Artis that they need to go upstairs. They can't get out the front because at this time more Templars are starting to come in the back door as well. With all the sounds, the Templars in the back door have now busted through and are coming in from the back. Too many. Kip yells that they need to get upstairs. So Artis, Rand, and Kip begin to push their way through the crowd. Many of them being the citizens of that were in the inn, do their best to make way for her and keep the Templars away from her. There's not a single person that they can see that's joining to help the Templars. Some people are just staying in the back and not getting involved. Only a few. Majority of the room have risen to Artis's defense. They reach the stairs, but as they do, the head Templar appears as he pushed his way through the crowd and reaches out and grabs Artis by the back of her hair, trying to pull her backwards. Rand's hand flashes, and his blade slips through the air, and the Templar screams as his hand is severed from his arm. The friends then very immediately begin racing up the stairs. Pikachu 2, this is my first time listening to the story, and I'm already attached to the characters. Oh, that's awesome. I'm so glad. I know there's a lot of this story that I've told. This is episode 1 of 110. If you like this episode, I promise you'll like the stuff before it. I really recommend checking it out. This is also available as an audio podcast on iTunes and Spotify and all the other places you can get podcasts if you prefer an audio version. But if you'd like to see what some of these characters look like, if you go to my website, onlydraven.com, there's a tab or a page for characters where I've digitally painted minis of all these characters as well, if you'd kind of like to get a feel for what each person looks like. I think you'd get an interest. It kind of is nice to be able to put a visual image to the names that I'm saying, including the gods and all the other main characters. You have to dig a while to get to these ones because this is the second generation of characters from this story at this point. I'm glad you like them. Thank you very much for the comment. They quickly rush upstairs. Artis is 3 stairs up before she feels the hand finally let go of her hair. It didn't immediately let go. It's that whole muscle grip thing. Your hand gets lost. The hand doesn't immediately go limp. It's a weird thing. You can read about it. Running up the stairs, they run into a room and slam the door behind them. Rand and Kip quickly grab a heavy dresser and slide it in front of the door. Looking around, they see that there's a single window as an exit. It's a window that doesn't open. Contrary to popular belief, you look at a medieval time period, not a lot of windows opened and closed back then. Even the windows that had glass on them. They just didn't have a lot of technology to be able to do that in a way that it wouldn't let in a lot of heat and or air, specifically air in the winter. So a lot of them were affixed solid where you could see through the glass, but you weren't opening and closing it. Kip breaks the window open with his knife, and as quickly as he can, knocks the glass as loose as possible. So, going around the edge with the blade, so it's not little pieces of glass sticking out they could get caught on. Not going to get it all, but he's going to try to get most of it. As soon as he feels it's clear, he jumps out the window. They're only second story up. Kip is a bard / rogue, half elf, by the way, and he jumps out and easily lands. Artis is next, Kip helping to catch her, and Rand following afterwards. Rand is a fighter, but he's very rogue-like in his training, stealth-wise. He's also the closest you might see to like a samurai type character. Raised that way. Yeah. They're on the ground but a moment when two men come rushing up. Once again, they pull their weapons out and a moment later realize they're two of the gentlemen that were helping them. These men were helped arranged by Cineas to help be their guides. Remember I said there's a couple people? They weren't able to get inside because the Templars showed up, but the fight's still raging inside. In fact, it's starting to spread outside the doors as well. With no time to waste, they quickly grab Artis and Rand and Kip and start leading them away. They only go a short distance, barely a block, when it's time. They are in a spot where they're going to have to go kind of around a corner. The road literally turns the buildings. It's not a cross. You have to go to the right. Kip rushes ahead. He's fast. Looks around the corner and sees that another contingent or group of Templars, probably about 15 to 20 strong, is making their way towards them down that road. They begin immediately looking for an alley, somewhere they can hide. When they hear someone say, psst, that whole sneaky noise when you're trying to get someone's attention and you're trying to be quiet, but like everybody hears it anyways. No one misses a psst. Everybody hears that, right? You ever seen that where you didn't say, hey, why would you say that so loud? You see that in a movie, someone goes, psst, you're like, everybody in the world heard that, man. Don't make noises like that. But that's what somebody did. They look over and around and they can see that there's a door open on a building across the street. And inside is an older woman who's waving at them to come inside. With very little choice, they quickly rush across and into the building. The older woman closes the door and douses the light, so it's dark inside. Remember, it's nighttime at this point. And it's not long before they hear the footsteps or the bootsteps of the Templars as they go passing on the street. After the sounds begin to fade, she lights a small candle. For the record, Kip's the only one with infravision. The rest of them are humans, so they wouldn't be able to see in the dark. So she lights a small candle and says, come with me, you can get out the back. They follow her to a back door, which in fact does exit out into another alley and away from the direction in which they came. Artis stops and thanks the woman for her kindness. The woman holds on to her and gives her a big hug and says, the young boy you helped was my brother's son. You have done more for my family than I could ever hope to repay. Go with the gods, young one. Again thanking her, Artis, Rand, Kip, and their two allies race down the alley and away from danger. The events of that night were the first domino to fall. The citizens who'd helped Artis in the tavern were eventually arrested or killed. The church was furious, openly now calling for the arrest of Artis and her friends, blaming them for the riot and naming them heretics and enemies of the church and of the city itself. Artis and her friends kept hidden for the next couple of days, hoping the excitement would die down and they'd be able to get news about what had happened to Tilden. Finally, the news came, and it was grave. Tilden had been publicly announced to be a traitor, heretic, and enemy of the church. Vanessa had come to give them the news. Again, Vanessa doesn't come that often. It's harder for her to get away. Her sources said that Tilden had been tortured for days, but never broke. Now it's been announced that in 3 days' time, he and the other survivors of the riot were to be executed at midnight when the moon was at its highest. You remember, children of the night worship the moon goddess. It makes sense why they would do this as a sacrifice to their goddess, right? Queen of the night, right? Lady of the night. That's who they all worship. Even though the Lord of the night, he is supposedly the one who speaks for her, right? No one's ever seen a lady of the night. He's like, no, I talk to her. She gives me messages and then I give them to you guys, like your normal cult. We have to do something, exclaimed Cineas, who along with Volos was there as well. Volos being the third cleric that's still there, and that's not counting Tilden. There were 4 total. Volos is a the blacksmith, and he is a cleric of, let me grab it again, Mavael. So I have my own gods, if you're just catching up to that. Vanessa, if you'll remember, is, of course, cleric of Helena, goddess of death. Technically a cleric of darkness, but they share common cause. They're all working together. Because whether you worship the light or you worship the darkness, you don't like people who aren't gods pretending to be gods, stealing your followers and executing your people. It's common ground. It's like, we'd still rather you worship the true gods than that guy, so we're going to work together kind of thing. So again, Volus and Cineas are there, and Cineas says, we have to do something. It's obviously a trap, says Ren. They're trying to lure us out into the open. They hope we'll try to save them. No doubt. They'll have extra men hidden in the crowd for sure, and it being held at night means there may be greater dangers lurking about, added Kip. And by that, we all know he's talking about vampires, right? If he's out there and you're fighting someone in the dark, vampires. That's a problem. Still, we cannot allow our friends to die in order to protect ourselves, stated Artis. We will intervene no matter the danger. Finally, exclaimed Maeve, surprising everyone. If I stayed in this room much longer, I was going to snap. Remember, she's been stuck in this room for almost a month. She can't go anywhere. Anybody go stir crazy. And she's not one, she's hearing about her friends in danger and being attacked, and Artis has been stabbed by some dude in an alleyway, and then some other guys tried to club her and grab her hair last night. Maeve wants to rip these people apart, and she's stuck in the basement. This is not a good time for Maeve. A paladin, a Minotaur paladin, who carries a Final Fantasy-sized two-handed sword. To give you an idea, a big one. She is a hoss, and she is not enjoying not getting to be there for her friends. And, her and Artis are besties. So, Maeve says, if I didn't get out here soon, I was going to snap. Maeve stood up and looking down at their cleric allies, she said, it's time for you three to take an active part in these events. We must strike at the church together now if we hope to ever have a chance at saving your people. So Maeve's like, the time for you guys to help us from the back, from hiding, is over. This is, if we're going to throw ourselves out here, this is our push against the church. We're going to be making our case to save these people and show the people who we are. We're going to need all the help we can get. And you guys being from here, citizen people know you, stepping out with us is going to have a big say. You guys are going to have to join in on this. The three clerics nodded in agreement. Volos and Cineas looked nervous, obviously. They're not really fighters. They never have been. But Vanessa only smiled. Regardless of the outcome, I believe my goddess will be meeting many new souls very soon. Remember, she worships the goddess of death. Regardless of who dies, she still wins a little bit. Artis frowned, obviously. Hopefully as few as possible. How are we going to do this? Volos asked. Don't worry, smiled Kip. I have a plan. Remember, Kip is a bard. Scariest of all classes. They're not Kender, but they're silly. Petal's a half Kender, for those of you who may be new. In case you didn't know that. Half human, half Kender. If you don't know what a Kender is, it's a Dragonlance race. It's very cool. So we're going to jump ahead now. So that I have a plan, and they start beginning their plans of what's going to be done. They cannot get into the church to try to save their friends that way. The church is just too well guarded. They've already been there. We've talked about it in a previous episode. It's almost like a fortress itself. Getting in there, even if they could gather a small force, would be mostly unsuccessful. Probably they'd all die. So breaking them in there is not going to work. They're going to have to try to save them when they're out of the temple, which is obviously the night that they're to be executed. So let's step ahead to that night. Get that wagon out of here, screamed the city guard. I can't, my lord, said the small man, obviously frightened. The axle's busted, and I can't get anyone here to fix it with this damn crowd everywhere. It was clear the wagon was broken. likely due to being overloaded with several huge barrels of wine. So there's this big wagon, the axle's busted, it can't roll, it's stuck, it's blocking traffic in the city. Huge, giant barrels, which are way too big to be on this stupid thing. Obviously, some fool overloaded it, has broken the axle, and they can't get repair people in here to get here and try to lift it up and fix it because of all the people around, because of the execution. If the captain gets on me about this, I swear I will thump your skull, replied the guard angrily. A short distance away, Artis used the ruckus to move further into the large crowd. She continuously had to fight the urge to scratch the itchy long beard on her face. Made of horse tail and stuck on with sap, it was one of the most uncomfortable things she'd ever worn. Artis is a cleric, but she is a fighting cleric. Okay, let me clear that up to you. She has a morning star. She bonks things. She is not someone who sits in the back. Okay, she is a battle cleric. So she's very muscular. And so she's enrobed right now over her own robes would be kind of like every man's robes. But very often with that beard could very easily pull off a man. Very muscular. Very muscular young lass. Let's see. The crowd was huge, filling the city square. Ahead of her, a large stage had been quickly erected, and it was here that the so-called criminals were to be beheaded. That's the form of execution they're going to go with. She knew her friends were nearby, hidden within the crowd as well. They'd all arrived separately. Men and women loyal to the true gods and their cause were also arranged by their allies. So they'd arrived separately because arriving as a group might draw more attention. So each one of them showed up, slipped into the crowd to where they're supposed to be for their plan. Mixed within the crowd are also supposed to be a handful of people that are loyal to the clerics, the local clerics, people that, because they have their own, a couple of maybe Templars and several loyal members, right? They may not actively walk around as a Templar, but they still fulfill that role. They help protect, in one manner or another, the clerics of whom they're sworn to protect. They're just in hiding like the clerics are. No one can be open about their allegiance to any of the old gods, hence, or lest the children of the night fall upon thee. So Artis has worked her way into this area, and she's not right up next to the stage. She's a ways away from it, but she's managed to work her way next to this big kind of barrel that's sitting there, and she's just kind of leaning on it as the crowd mills about, right? It's already after dark, right? It's getting close to the time of big stuff happening. And so she's hoping, much like herself, everyone else is getting into their positions. She didn't have to wait long as the drums began to beat. As the sound began, Artis could only hope that everyone was ready and that what they'd arranged would be enough. The crowd is huge. Probably majority of the city has shown up for this. It's been implied over the last 3 days that much of it is mandatory. That if you're a true believer, you should be there to witness these heretics see justice kind of thing, right? And people who are afraid don't want to appear like they're in league with the people who are about to be executed because they could end up there next. So a lot of people have shown up for this. And then some people it's morbid curiosity, and some people like that kind of thing. I mean, who knows? Artists can see that there are a large amount of Templars and city guards positioned all around the square. Up on the stage, up on some of the balconies that overlook it, mixed amongst the crowd, but especially along the edges of the crowd. So a large amount of them. Now, we've talked in the past that the city guard are technically separate from the church, although most of them will still follow an order from a Templar or something because they're not trying to rock the boat either. There is no king in this kingdom. Remember, it is ruled by a group of 13 senators. But those senators very much bow to the will of the Lord of the Night. He effectively runs the country without being officially named the leader, other than he is the moral heart of the country, of course. But the city guards are overall outnumbered by the amount of Templars, which is probably by design of the church, right? They would much rather that fall into their control, the active criminals and so on and so forth be under their sway than someone else's. It's easier to say who's a criminal and who's not when you're in that position. As the drums beat, they could see more Templars and several clerics of the night, of the children of the night, marching towards the stage. Amongst them were these so-called criminals. Mixed in the middle, Artis was able to see Tilden, and it was clear even from this distance that he was barely able to stand, and that two of the other criminals were doing their best to support him. All of the men being taken up on stage, and they are all men in this situation, had been severely injured, or had been injured in some way. Tilden looks beat all to hell. The crowd is mostly silent as this happens, but there were some occasional murmurs and stuff going in the crowd, which do pick up when people start to see the condition of these people being taken up on the stage that's been erected here. It's at that moment Quintius notifies Artis that he can sense great evil somewhere in the nearby area. He can't tell exactly where, because again, we've discussed this, when you're seeking evil, the more powerful an evil is, sometimes the harder it is to find, because it learns to mask itself from certain ways. And so he can tell that there's evil, and it's coming from several directions, not just one, but he couldn't say, it's that guy. That's the evil one. He can say, there's an evil person somewhere over there, and there's at least one or two evil people this way. It's a heads up. It's the closest he can give right now. And when he says evil, he's not just talking about somebody with a bad attitude or a pickpocket. He's saying a source of great evil. So we're looking at something higher than the normal evil. Super evil, if you will. All right, so on stage, already standing there, was a very large man with an executioner's head on, because I am a fan of the classics. There's a large executioner with his hood on. Like in most cities, any man who is an overly large man is feared to be the executioner and is given great birth when they walk down the street. You never really quite know which one of them really is the executioner. It's easier that way. But because of that, a lot of people who aren't an executioner, but look like they could fit the bill, still have hard lives and a hard time making friends. Sad days for executioners. As the men were lined up on the stage, there were 3 or 4 clerics of the children of the night there. Right? Clerics of the night, which I just realized would be the same COTN, children of the night, clerics of the night. It's the exact same letters. Huh. Okay, sorry, I gotta remember that for later. So clerics of the night are on stage, but one who is dressed more extravagantly than the others, mostly because he has a very big hat, steps up to the front of the stage to address the crowd. And the crowd hushes. It was already pretty hushed, but it finishes hushing as the man prepares to speak. He has a big scroll that he opens up he's going to read from, because that looks very official. And he begins to address the crowd. Now, the first thing that catches Artis off guard by this is just seeing this man and knowing the description. She knows this is not the Lord of the Night. This is not the head of the church, who they expected to be up on stage this evening. Remember, Ran and Kip have seen him. They know what he looks like. They've given him, they've talked all about him. Got up close and personal. Got to see what he looked like. This is not him. In fact, it's his right-hand man. And he begins to explain why. He says, "It is with great regret that our Lord of the Night was unable to join us this evening. The last moment he was called away for a matter of great importance. In fact, I dare may say, a huge threat against our people, and he is off to deal with it. It is only something of that nature that he'd be doing to protect all of you that would keep him away from something as important as this. But he wishes he could be here, but he can't. As our Lord's right hand, it is my honor to carry out the justice of the church on these criminals that have been gathered before you today." He then begins to read out the charges for each man one by one. reading his name, what he's accused of, pretty much all the same thing. Violence against the church, heresy, inciting and participating in a riot, murder and or injury of church members, all that kind of stuff. Always ending with enemy of the church. And while they're reading this out, artists can hear the grumbling in the crowd. There's a lot of people who don't agree with that, but there's also some people are here. There's people out there who are loyal. So there's a mix of feelings throughout the crowd. But nearby, maybe it's just her own hopeful thought, but he feels like she hears more mumbling of dissent than she does support. Finally, at the end, he reads off Tilden's charges. And as he reads off these charges, the murmuring grows a little bit louder and gets loudest still when the final charge is read, is claiming to worship a forgotten god of evil. Now, Saoirse is the goddess of nature, and he is a cleric of Saoirse. That's Saoirse, in case anybody wants to know how Saoirse is spelled. It's the hardest to spell of all my gods, I know. Gaelic, though. Big fan of the word. Saoirse is cleric of nature. Far from evil as you can possibly get. At this point, the crowd, many of them, could tell are quite unhappy at that claim. Now, Brother Minos, who's the man up there, the right hand of the Lord of the Night, is very unhappy with what he's hearing in the crowd. You expected cheers of support. We're going to take out this evil guy. You should be happy about that. But no, he's hearing dissent, and he doesn't like it. So he calls for Tilden first to be brought to the block. So we're going to get this out of the way right now. We're going to take care of him, and then we'll lop the heads off of these other guys. We're going to get rid of this guy who's causing dissent that I don't like the sound of, get it knocked out, so that way it's over with, and then we can deal with the rest of these criminals. He doesn't say that, but that's what he's trying to do. So 2 Templars grab him and begin, you could say, dragging him to the block. It's not like he's trying to fight it. He's too weak to walk, which is why he's kind of being dragged to the block. They barely take a step when a man's voice cries out near the back of the crowd. Everyone's attention is drawn that way, and the crowd spins and looks, and artist looks, and everybody on stage is like, what the hell? Standing on a large crate in the back is Volos. Volos decries the acts that are about to be taken, claiming that Tilden is a good man, and that many of you in the crowd here today know him, and know he's been nothing but a friend to any of you. And while it is true he worships Saoirse, she is a god of nature and a goddess of love. She is not evil. She does not bring darkness. She is the one of which life springs. How could one who worships the essence of life itself be evil? It's nature that provides for us. And he has provided time and time again for those of you in the crowd. Now, while he's saying this, of course, Minos is like, you shut up. Arrest that man. And he's charging, and some Templars are trying to get to the crowd to get to where he is. And he's trying to get that attention and get him hushed. But then Tilden pulls off his own cloak and is standing there in robes. And clear on his chest, they can see the holy medallion of his own god that he worships. And he reveals that he himself is also a cleric of the old god. And like Tilden, I have never done anything but support my neighbors and done what I can to help you and care for you in times of need. Minos yells again to arrest that man, that heretic. But as he does, a short distance away on the other side, Cineas steps up some stairs, or he's a little bit higher, steps up on a park bench, if you will. He's a big guy. He can't climb up anything real big. Remember, he's a chunky guy. I know. And again calls out what Brother Volos is saying is true. Both Tilden and Volos are servants of the old gods and servants of you, the people, have side by side, there to help and so on and so forth. The same type of things, positive intent. And also says, the true gods have not abandoned you. They've been here all the time. And they will continue to be here for you. You have but to reach out to them. You have only but to ask for them. And then he takes off his robe, struggles a second, he's a big guy, and reveals that he too is a cleric. Minos is totally angry at this point, calling for him to be arrested. Shut that man up. I'm sorry, Cineas. And Cineas says that the true gods have not abandoned you. In fact, it is at this time that they have come to deliver you from the evil that so effortlessly has taken control of your lives. Minos, of course, yells, denying that he lies. Artis turns to the side and smiles as she sees Ran is standing next to her. He's very sneaky. He puts his hands together and she puts her foot in there and he lifts her up and she stands on top of the barrel next to him, pulling off the beard and removing her own cloak, standing there in her robes. Immediately, Minos notices her and his eyes should have both in kind of shock but also delight. You could tell he wanted that to happen. And Artis begins to speak. I am a cleric of truth. And so it is truth that I will speak to you today. These men and women of faith who claim to worship a goddess of the night, a goddess who only reveals themselves in darkness, is not but lies, an attempt to control and persecute you. I have been led here by the gods to help free you from this occupation. And as you can see, your own people are here at my side, willing to fight for your freedom. In a moment there, I just had this weird thing like she's in Braveheart makeup, but it's nothing like that. It's not that over the top. It's a very solid speech, I promise. So I'm just giving details. I can't say it as well as she does. Minos begins screaming. Get that woman. Kill that heretic. Bring her up here. Get in there. He's furious. As literally the Templars that are surrounding the crowd are trying to force their way in and get through, but the people seem to be resistant. No one's moving out of their way. In fact, they're kind of impeding them at this point. They're interested in what they're hearing from these clerics that are just popping up all around them. It's like Pop-Tarts. Sorry. I had a Pop-Tart earlier. It's made me think about that. Pop-Tarts. There's a strawberry one. They're popping up from everywhere. And some of these people are like, I did know him. He's great. He's a blacksmith. He makes me nails and other things. And he helped me when my kid got sick. And so I wondered how he was so helpful and all these type of things. People are connecting these people with acts of their own lives, acts of charity, where these people have taken selfless of their own time and expenses to help people. And people are like, oh, he's just a really nice guy. And then they're like, oh, no, wait a minute. He's a really nice guy. And this is why. People are connecting these things. Minos waves. And up on kind of a balcony overlooking the town square, 6 Templars step forward. Standing next to each one of them is a member of the city guard. Kind of appears to be their backup. These 6 Templars raise crossbows and begin pointing them at Artis and the crowd. Let's be honest, if their aim's not that good, some innocent people are going to get shot too. Minos gives the order to shoot her. And they begin to raise their crossbows and take aim. But before they can, the 6 city guards reach into their belts and pull out twisted, jagged blades. And stepping forward, begin to plunge them into the bodies of the Templars in front of them. The Templars, caught unaware, scream out, dropping their bows, trying to fight back, but they're stabbed over and over again until they fall to the ground, bleeding from everywhere. Again, everyone freezes and the crowd goes silent. Even Minos is caught by surprise at this. From not far away on a balcony steps Vanessa, dressed all in black and red, the colors of her goddess. This false church has angered the gods of light and the gods of darkness. And for this transgression, they will pay with their lives. As everyone can recognize, she's a cleric too. But they're all like, wait a minute, that's a way spookier looking cleric than all these other clerics. Although we kind of know her, she's a noble, and she's never really been a jerk to me. But that's kind of evil looking. And some guards just stabbed those other guys who were going to shoot at us. But that was kind of good, because they might have shot me by mistake. So that was a good thing. And people are very confused at this moment. As soon as she is done speaking, there's a small explosion from the side of the market, or the square, as one of the huge barrels on the back of the wagon busts open, revealing Maeve standing there in her full plate mail armor, carrying her humongous two-handed sword. And chaos ensues. So at that moment, things start to happen. Because Minos is like, kill all of them. Everybody standing up that looks not like me, kill them. Capture them, kill them, do whatever. Get those people. And literally, the Templars attempt to do just that. The Templars begin attempting to attack. And throughout the crowd, several other people draw weapons, coming to the defense. These are the loyal people to Artis and them that are in the crowd. People draw their weapons that are here to assist, who then begin attacking the Templars, trying to keep them at bay, and keeping them from getting further into the crowd and hurting innocent people, as well as our cleric friends that are popping up all over this place. Up on the balcony, where the archers, crossbowmen were, several more Templars rush on there and begin attacking the city guards that were stabbing the Templars. Guards all around the square see this, and in a moment of confusion are like, we're being attacked by the Templars. Defend yourselves. And the guards start drawing their weapons, and they start attacking the Templars. And the Templars are like, those aren't real guards. Those are people here to kill us. We got to get them first. And they start attacking. So suddenly the guards are fighting against the Templars, two factions that were believed to be in league, but just a moment ago. Several of the clerics, children of the night, pull wands and different items from their belts or from within their robes and begin the act of casting spells or spell-like abilities. Remember, we knew that they had abilities, although they were not clerical in nature. They seemed to be using some form of items or trinkets and begin to try to use spells, at which point our hero clerics begin doing the same thing, those with spell-casting ability. Artis is a spellcasting kind of person, but she's more of a thump you on the head kind of person. She has some spellcasting, but that's not really her primary thing. Loyal people who are cleric draw weapons, people are fighting over. Citizens do one of two things. They either join in with a side or try to flee, which of course just causes more chaos. So they're trying to escape the square, hundreds of people, if not 1,000 people, while all these Templars and guards are in there and people are trying to fight. It becomes very hard to tell who's on which side. Although, as Artis still standing on this barrel, glancing around, with Rand at the bottom with his sword drawn, running to protect her, seems that more people are on her side, but it's hard to tell, right? Especially when you count the city guards. Are they really helping me because they are believe in me, or are they helping because they think they're under attack? It's hard to tell. Suddenly, Rand feels a hands grab him on his chest and back. So standing on side of him, someone reaches out and grabs his chest and back, grabs his clothing. And stumble over that. Oh, good Lord. Very easily, effortlessly, there it is, picks him off the ground, and literally tosses him into the crowd. Quintius tries to warn Artus, but unfortunately is too late before these strong hands grab her, lifting her off the barrel and carrying her through the crowd. Maeve, seeing this, of course, Maeve towering over everyone else, she's fighting like 5 Templars at this point, and a couple guards. And a couple guards are helping her because they don't know which guards are good guards. And she's just got her huge buster sword, and she's doing her thing. Still sees this and cries out to her allies, help Artus. Artus is trying to pry these hands off her. She can't get a look at whoever has her. When she grabs the hands, they're like stone. They're solid. She can't move them in even a tiny little bit. And they're carrying her like she's a feather. This creature is much stronger than she is. Several citizens step in the path. One has a weapon, the other just whatever they could grab, a stick, a rock, whatever. Again, citizens trying to help. Stand up and try to stop this man thing from taking Artus. But with one hand, the creature knocks them aside. Like they were nothing. Artus begins trying to cast a spell herself. And her hands are held in such a way she can't reach out and grab Quintius, which would be her first instinct at this point, or her weapon. They're both at her belt, and the way she's being manhandled and carried, she doesn't have that ability to really unhook and grab a weapon or anything. She'd be more afraid she'd drop it, and she doesn't want to take that gamble. She will not risk dropping Quintius. There was a whole adventure about losing Quintius. She's not going to take that chance again. So she begins trying to cast a spell, though it's difficult when you're being bobbed up and down and run. The creature is just about free of the crowd and steps past 2 Templars who, the opposite, were trying to fight their way in. Artus cries out, attempting to cast her spell, when out of nowhere, a bolt of purple lightning flies through the air and strikes the creature, sending Artemis flying, mostly unharmed, but knocking the vampire flat on his ass. Artus rolls, trying to quickly get her balance, reaches down and grabs a hold of Quintius, assuring himself he's still there. And looking up, the vampire she sees sits up, smoke coming from the burn on its chest. It looks up and snarls, its pointed fangs visible in the torchlight and moonlight. Just in time to see the pointed, sharp end of the staff come down, piercing through its chest. The vampire screams an unholy scream that draws attention from all across the market, or the town square. And while battle doesn't completely stop, it lessens as everyone kind of whips around to hear what this inhuman noise is. As its body crumbles to dust, Artus sees Petal standing there. No longer is she wearing her wizard's robes, but is now dressed in the black armor, black leathers that her mother had sewn for her. In her hand was a staff crackling with magical power. Minos stares at her in fury. With a calm voice, Petal says, "No longer will the living death be allowed to walk this land. I have come to end it, once and for all." Those of you who may be out there and new listening, Petal is a wild mage, but her parents are hunters. Undead hunters. She's been raised her whole life to fight that which is the unliving, both through magic and deeds. And is a skill she's pretty good at. Her parents are the best. She has natural skills there too. standing there with Luthien's staff, which means she's left the tower at this point. And I can tell you the tower has crumbled as well. Standing there with that staff in hand, she is ready to lay out some justice of her own. And that is where we're going to stop for this evening. Whew, well, that went a little bit longer than I expected. Hour and 40 minutes. I try to keep it normally close to an hour, hour and 15. I used to do 2 and 3 hour episodes, of course. But then I learned it was just very hard for people to keep up with it. So I try to keep them a little bit shorter now. But where we're finishing it off tonight, the marketplace is in chaos. No, I keep saying marketplace. The town square. Marketplace is somewhere else. The town square is in chaos. Minos and the clerics are now tossing spells. Artis and her allies are fighting back. The people are caught in the middle. And Petal has arrived and just taken out a vampire. But is he the only one there? Well, tune in next time. Because we're about 8 days away from the next episode, where we'll continue this story. And I promise we'll take up right from where we left off today. I'm not going to switch over to other people or anything. We will continue right with this and continue telling the tale of and showing what Petal has learned in her time in the tower. But that is going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to the new folks who popped in and experienced it for the first time, whether it was here during chat or whether you're listening to it on any of the audio podcast places, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you go. I definitely appreciate you watching and listening along and giving me the opportunity to share this story that has been 30 plus years in the making. And I look forward to continue telling it to you. We're getting into the meaty stuff now. I think you're going to. If you enjoyed this, you're really going to like what happens next. But we will, of course, continue that on our next episode. Thank you again for watching. If you're watching it on YouTube, please remember to click like and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to this on the audio networks, please remember to rate it or give it 5 hearts or a thumbs up. It depends where you are. I never know. 5 stars. It'd be great if you'd give me some type of review or rating just so I know whether you like it and what I should keep doing. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I'm going to call that for today. I hope you all have yourselves a wonderful evening, and I hope you're out there enjoying yourself a good little fantasy story, whether it be in Dungeons & Dragons or a video game or reading a good book. Hopefully out there you're living a little bit of fantasy yourself. All right? I'm going to call that a day. You all have a wonderful evening, and I will see you again for another episode of Mergeworlds.